It's such an honor to be here in Orlando. I got in very, very early this morning. It was a late night flight, and I must say I've never been greeted so warmly. You know, the hotel staff. Um, what an honor! What a pleasure! What a privilege to be here with you today. Just by show of hands, how many have read my books? Only so I know what to cover. And all right, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much. I ask the question so I know how much to dwell on the story and how much to dwell on the extraordinary aftermath or the things I've learned or what is even happening now in life. Now, what I ask is that everyone just close your eyes for a moment. We've had a little break and we just want to be very, very present. So close your eyes and take a big, deep breath. Just breathe in deep and sigh it out. And if you would, just reflect back on your earliest, happiest memory. You know, was it that little girl in the swing? Was it the little boy with baseball or fishing or whatever that might have been? But just reflect fondly on your earliest, happiest memory. And as you do that, connect with how you feel. Just push that energy out of your head, out of your mind, and go right into your heart. And get in touch with how it feels. And take another big deep breath and just hold that in. And realize you're literally breathing in light. And then exhale it out as pure, unconditional love. And open your eyes, please. I simply do that so that we can be present in the moment. You know, all we have is right now. I had you reflect on a previous memory. But if there's one thing you can take from today, it's that every moment is sacred. Every moment is an absolute gift. And yesterday is gone. The past is finished. And we don't know what's going to happen 10 minutes from now. But we have right now. This is the moment I have. What will I do with it? What will I create within it? How will I choose to feel and what will I choose to experience? Because in truth, you are the creator of your own experience. You literally get to choose how to experience each sacred moment, moment to moment to moment. And it's beautiful. Now, my story begins at a very sacred place for me in a very sacred moment, and that is a little lonely roadside mile marker 80. You know, enough of you are aware of my story, so I won't dwell deeply into that. But what happened to me was we were on a family vacation. And we were driving back from southern Utah, where I'm from, and Utah is beautiful. I live in the northern part, up in the Alpine Mountains, but you can drive for 3 hours south, and you've got the beautiful red rocks and arches and all those type of scenes. And so the landscape changes drastically in a very short time frame in my home state. But as we were driving home, I was driving the car. My wife was seated next to me, and our two little boys were in the back seat. And we'd had a beautiful vacation. It was Easter. It was the Easter weekend. So we had spent the weekend with family. We had done the traditions of the family, like dyeing Easter eggs and having a big Easter dinner. And we had just packed up the car to leave and come home. It was a Monday morning. And I put everybody in the car. We buckled everybody up. And I was just putting the car in drive, and my wife, Tamara, reached over to me and said, "Wait just a minute." And I put the car back in park. She said, "I just want to go say goodbye to Mom and Dad one more time." And I watched as she unbuckled, and there was her mother and father, Grandma and Grandpa on the porch waving, as Grandma and Grandpa do. And I noticed how she got out of the car and she went up to them and not only hugged them, but she kissed each of them. And I noticed that. I watched it, and she came happily, joyfully bounding back in the car and hopped in and put on her seatbelt. And then she was ready to go. Now, I bring that up for a specific reason. She was in the moment. She realized that the now was sacred, and she followed that whisper. We had no idea what was going to transpire that day. But she was aware of the whisper. Go say goodbye to Mom and Dad one more time. And she did it. I'm going to go do this. That's being in the moment. That's being in the now. And to watch how she hugged and kissed them and came back joyfully and got back in the car, I will never forget. Because as the day transpired, that would be the last goodbye for Mom and Dad. Well, she buckled up, and I put the car in drive, and away we went up the freeway. And I was in a hurry. I was rushing. I was late for work. I was trying to get back. We had a half-day's drive. I had 27 things going on. I'd called the guys at the office, told them I would be late. I would get there as quickly as possible. And there I went, just racing up the interstate. I'd cranked the cruise control up to 75, which is as fast as I could legally go. And away we went with all that stuff in my head. That to-do list, that, I call it chatter. And when we started off this morning, I said, just move that energy down into your heart. And this is what happened to me. I was driving up the interstate, thinking about all those things, and I happened to just glance in the rearview mirror. And when I did, I noticed, first of all, my little toddler son, Griffin. He was 14, 15 months old, just starting to walk, just saying his first words. He had been fantastic on Easter Sunday. He got up and he was all about the colored eggs. And he was crawling some, and he would lift himself up and walk a few steps and fall down and bump his head and slobbering as toddlers do, and he would find the colored eggs and he would bring them to me, and he was only saying very, very limited words, but he would say, "Dad, ball." He thought the colored eggs were a ball. And I glanced at him in the rearview mirror, and suddenly all that chatter in my head just settled right here in my heart. He had been a miracle baby. We had had complications with the first pregnancy. My wife had had a partial hysterectomy. There was all kinds of medical things we had gone through to finally get pregnant again and get Griffin here, and there he was, sound asleep in his car seat. And all that chatter just settled in, and I thought, what a beautiful gift. What a magnificent little boy. And I noticed details. It's almost as if time stood still. I noticed how his hands were laid on the car seat, and how he rested his head, and I noticed how long his eyelashes were. And I felt him. I felt the love I had for him. I felt the connection that we had as father and son, even in that young age. And then I glanced behind me where my 7-year-old, Spencer, he was my oldest son, and he had gotten Star Wars action figures in his Easter basket. And he was having the most grand lightsaber battle in the universe with all the sound effects and everything that goes on. And I felt him, and I thought, what a joy. He had been such a good son. Never was a problem. Slept through the night at a very early age, would play, color. He and I used to sit, and we'd simply toss a ball back and forth for hours. He never wanted to stop doing that. In fact, on the Saturday night before Easter, we had flown a kite together. It was a Darth Vader kite. We got it, and there was a wind in the springtime, and we flew this kite. And I felt him, and I thought, what a blessing, what a joy. And then I glanced over at my wife, who had also reclined her seat, and she was sound asleep. Right there, and I was still holding her hand. I was holding her hand with my right hand and driving with the left. And I noticed her and details of her essence. I love how Anita talked about essence. Don't you love Anita? I mean, isn't she a beautiful soul? Give her another hand. I love Anita for the energy she brings. And I was experiencing this in the car. Here I was holding my wife's hand, and I felt her essence. I noticed how she held my hand, and she only held on to 3 fingers, and I don't know why. You know, she had small hands, and we had been through 10 years of marriage and 2 sons, and here she was still holding my hand the same way she had on that second date when I had $2 in my pocket and took her to a dollar movie as a starving, college student. And I thought, what did I do to deserve her in my life? And I had this absolute moment of gratitude. Absolute gratitude. And it was strange. It was only a moment. I talked about that. I mean, this was a rear view glance in the mirror and a glance over at my wife, and then my attention was back to the road. But in those sacred moments, there was this flood of gratefulness, thankfulness, gratitude, blessings. And then away I went up the road. Now, it was about an hour after that. And there was reports of crosswinds. There was reports of a red pickup truck that was driving erratically on the interstate. The most difficult part of the story is that in my heart of hearts, I know I dozed off at the wheel for just a second. I just nodded off, and then I was back up. But when I did that, I overcorrected. And when I overcorrected, I lost control of the vehicle at 75 miles an hour. And it began to roll, not off the road, but down the road, propelled by the concrete. The accident reports say it probably rolled 6 to 8 times. It was a horrific automobile accident. And I blacked out for most of that. I remember losing control of the car. And I don't talk about this a lot, but I remember what I heard. I remember the absolute panic of what is going on. And then I blacked out. But as the car came to a stop, I was fully conscious. Then I became fully conscious in a very astute awareness. And the first thing I heard was my 7-year-old son, Spencer, crying in the back seat. I heard him hysterically crying. Now, as a father, I thought, thank goodness he's okay. I've got to get to him. I've got to get to him and make sure he's all right. And that's when I realized I could not move. I was pinned either to the seat or the floorboard. I wasn't sure. I was struggling to breathe. I couldn't see. I had no idea of my injuries. Now, what had actually happened is both of my legs had been shattered and crushed. The left leg was amputated above the knee. My back had been broken. My rib cage was crushed. My lungs were collapsing. My right arm had practically been torn off. There was no muscle through the rotator cuff or anything holding it on, and then it had been lacerated very severely underneath it. And then the seat belt had come through my midsection and ruptured all my intestines. I had no idea. All I knew is my son was crying and I had to get to my son. That's when I realized that no one else was crying. And it was in that sacred moment, and funny I would call it sacred, that I realized my wife and youngest child were gone. They had been killed instantly at the scene of the accident. This was the worst hell a man could ever be in. There I was pinned. I couldn't move. I was losing consciousness. I had a son crying that I couldn't get to. Half the family was gone, and I was driving the car. I was sober, I was going the speed limit, but the guilt, the overwhelming guilt of what do I do, and the panic, the chaos and the sheer terror of what had taken place was absolutely overwhelming. And I recall saying to my oldest, 7-year-old little boy, I was able to eke out, "It's going to be okay." And my last thought was, that's a lie. It's not okay. And in that horrific chaos, suddenly there was this calm. And I only go into some of the details of the chaos, not to be graphic or sensationalize it, but to set the tone for the drastic difference in feeling. Because in that terror came calmness, stillness. And then it felt like I was surrounded by light, or a bubble of light. The words are sometimes difficult to describe, but it was as if this tangible light came around me and began to comfort me in the most awful moment of my life, the darkest dark I had ever been in, and suddenly there was light. And as that light surrounded and I was confused and wondered what was going on, it felt as if I was raising above the scene of the accident. And I was a little bit confused. I had read stories of tunnels of light and things like that, but here I was in light. And I began to realize, am I okay? Am I all right? And as I did that, I looked to my left, and here was my wife, who I knew was deceased at the scene, and yet there she was, and she was okay too, except she was emphatic. And this haunted me for a while. She was actually emotional and crying, and she was saying, "No, no, no, Jeff, you can't. You've got to go back. You've got to go back. You've got to go back." Now, I learned a lot about choice in that moment. I mean, here I was looking at the woman I loved more than life, and yet I knew I had a little boy crying in the back seat of that car. And choice. Every moment has a choice. And from my perspective, there's only one rule in the entire universe, and it's free will and choice. You get to choose. And I chose to come back. And that was a very poignant goodbye. And I hesitated to speak about that for years because I know so many people lose loved ones and they don't get to say goodbye. And here I had watched the hug and the kiss, and here I was in this beautiful light. And I got to say goodbye. How many have lost someone? I mean, raise your hand high. Well, that's what this is about. That's why I talk about these things. Because I couldn't talk about it for years. Couldn't talk about it, couldn't bring it up. I'd just fall apart. As I made the choice to come back, I found myself wandering around a hospital, literally moving about a ER trauma setting. Now, I have no concept of time in this bubble of light. I don't know how long I was there. I later found out that people had arrived on the scene. One happened to be a doctor, of all things. He was able to render immediate aid. He was able to take care of Spencer, my 7-year-old, who was not badly hurt. He was banged up a little bit, but he basically walked away from the accident. But emotionally, he thought the whole family was gone. And here was this kind doctor. They rushed us to a local hospital. This doctor was even able to professionally see to my deceased loved ones in an honoring way. The small hospital knew they could do nothing for me, and they life-flighted me into Salt Lake City. My son was also life-flighted in. They kept us in proximity. He went to a children's hospital. I went to a different hospital. But I had no concept of that. I had said the most poignant goodbye I would ever say, and then I was wandering around this hospital. And I will never forget this. Everyone I saw, the nurses, the doctors, the patients, the families, everyone I saw, I knew them absolutely perfectly. I knew everything about them. I knew their love, their hate, their light, their dark, their joy, their troubles, their all of it. It was as if they were me. It was as if they were me. I knew them as well as I knew myself. And I had an absolute overwhelming love for them. An unconditional love. It didn't matter. You know, the heroin addict or the saintly grandmother. I saw them as these beautiful, divine beings. And I knew that we were connected. In fact, there was a oneness. There was a oneness. I was connected to them in such a way, even though I never knew them in this realm, I had this unconditional love. I wanted to rush to them and embrace them. I was overwhelmed with it. And I had grown up in a Christian home. You know, we read Bible verse. And as I was experiencing this in this profound way, this verse came up that said, "Inasmuch as you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it unto me," which I used to think was a nice thing about being nice. But this went to a much deeper level. Oh, they are me. I am them. The master that shared that thought knew that he was no different than the beggar in the street or the person in prison, but that we were literally one. And I was experiencing that oneness, and it was absolutely overwhelming. And I finally came up to a man laying on the bed or gurney there that I didn't feel anything from, which I thought was odd, and so I stepped closer to look, to realize I was looking at me, or my body. I was not that, and that was a profound realization. I'm not my body. And I knew I was to get back in it. And that was as quick as a thought. I also learned how powerful our thoughts are. The choice to come back, simply a thought, I'm choosing this. The thought to get back in the body, simply a thought, I'm doing that. And in that thought, there was no figuring it out. Boom, I was back in the body. But then back to the pain, the grief, the terror, the guilt, all of it. I was ventilated, so I couldn't speak. I mean, my legs were obviously immobile. My right arm was immobile. They tied my left arm down because I kept tearing at all the tubes and equipment. And I spent almost 6 months in the hospital. I was in ICU for 3 months. I kept throwing pulmonary embolisms, the blood clots that would lodge in your lungs. And it was almost as if I had one foot in this realm and one foot in that realm much of the time. Now, by that time, I was on a lot of morphine. And many have said, well, you know, I mean, you're out of your head. But I would have these interesting conversations with my deceased wife. And I would call them dreams, but they felt real. The dream felt like me in that hospital bed. That was reality. And some of them almost seemed trivial. I mean, she wanted her cousin to have her one special ring. She wanted her niece to have the other one. She wanted her sister-in-laws to have the party dresses that she loved, and she wanted to be buried with the baby in her arms. And I couldn't speak any of that. What I didn't know was the families at the time, and it was horrific for them. Our families got along well. I was very lucky. Tamara's family had decided that they had a burial plot back down in southern Utah, and they would take Tamara and Griffin and bury them down there. But at the time, the doctors were saying, we don't know if Jeff's going to make it. And my family was saying, well, shouldn't we bury them all together? And we don't know that we want him clear down in southern Utah. Not that I would have been there, but that's where I would have been buried, or the remains of me. And then what about Spencer? Well, in these conversations with Tamara, she let me know, I want to be buried near our home so that our little boy has a place to go, just so he can maybe feel close to me. Well, the interesting thing is there was an insurance issue. I'd been life-flighted to a hospital that was not in my insurance network. And therefore, it was necessary that I be transferred. Now, you know, the families were upset about it. Everyone was upset. The ambulance crew showed up and they refused to move me. They said, we're not taking that liability. They had to bring life flight back in to move me 3 miles to another hospital. But in the process, they briefly took out the ventilator. And I was able to barely talk, but say, I've been having these amazing conversations. Tamara wants to be buried near our home with Griffin in her arms. She wants this little song sang. And it was a Celtic song, by the way. Where's my kilted friend? Anyway, I was able to share those things with key family members who honored it and said, we'll do that. And I'll get into that a little bit later, of having a place to go for Spencer and for me as well. When you think your life is falling apart, I mean, when they said, we've got to transfer him, you know, the insurance company, everybody was up in arms. My younger brother's an attorney. He wanted to sue everybody, you know, the hospital, the doctors, the insurance company. My older brother was a law enforcement officer and trained EMT. He was like, there's no way this is happening. It wasn't falling apart. It was literally falling into place. Everything was in perfect order. I was transferred. They completed the amputation. They did all the things to literally save my life. And I began to heal. I began to get well. Mine was not spontaneous. Mine took months and up to a year. But I did begin to heal. And the most profound event of all of it was at the end of my hospital stay. I was off the morphine. I was out of surgical recovery. I was in rehabilitation. And I was going to sleep one night. I was finally sleeping on my side. I had laid on my back so long, the back of my head had been rubbed bald. And they had finally stabilized my abdominal wounds. They'd had to leave them open because of infection for so long, but they'd finally stabilized them, and I was able to sleep on my side. And I fell into a very deep, beautiful sleep. And while I was sleeping, I felt that rise. I felt that light. I felt that bubble of light again, and I thought, oh, I know what this is. Except this time the light went away, and I was in the most beautiful place that I'd ever been, except I remembered it. I remembered it. I call it home now. People talk of heaven or spirit world or whatever. I call it home. I was home. And I began running. And it was a very physical experience. I was running. I could feel the energy beneath my feet. I could feel it firing up through my calves and into my thighs, and I was running joyfully, 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 knowing I was home and I was okay. And then I got the message, you're not here to stay. And at about that same time, I noticed this corridor. It was an interesting corridor, and I knew intuitively that I was to go down that. And so I did. I began to run down it. And then at the end, as I slowed down and looked, there was a crib. And so I went to the crib, and I peeked in it. And there was my little Griffin, sleeping as peacefully as he'd been in the back seat of the car. Well, I swept him up and held him. And I realized how the universe works. I'm not pretending that my son was still a little boy, but somehow that's what I deserved to have. I love the Robin Williams film, What Dreams May Come. Perhaps I was creating it, perhaps the universe was creating it, but there I was, in a very real way, holding my little boy. And I began to kiss him, and I could feel him. I could feel his body solid against me. I could feel his rib cage expanding with breath. I could feel his breath on my neck, and I was weeping, thinking, how can this be? How can this be? And as I held him, I felt a presence come up behind me that was so overwhelming. It was so powerful. It was so cosmic. It was so wise. It was so ancient. And yet it was so absolutely personal and absolutely loving. I didn't dare turn around. In honesty, as I was sitting there, I had the thought, I hope I'm forgiven. See, I'd grown up believing that God was going to judge me and that I was probably in trouble. I grew up believing that life was a test and I would have to pass the test and do everything right or God would not be happy with me. And so I had this moment of fear of, I hope. And then as I held my little boy, I felt those divine arms wrap around and hold me. And what I felt was, there's nothing to forgive. You're my little boy too. And then I had this huge download of truth, knowledge, comprehension. I saw my life. You know, I saw everything that had happened, and Anita spoke to this beautifully as well. Everything was in perfect order. All of a sudden, everything was just perfect for me. I saw my childhood. I saw the wreck. I saw how every player had showed up in my life in the perfect way, that I would have the experience I came here to have. And the most profound thing of it is I realized that I had created it. That I had said, this is what I want to experience, that I might know who I'm not, to ever embrace who I am. And what I felt was all this magnificent love saying, yes, yes, yes. See, I used to think that God had done it to me. You know, it was part of that test. Well, we'll see what you do and how you handle all this. But what I realized is that I had done it for myself, and the entire universe supported it. And even Tamara and Griffin loved me enough to leave, that I would learn what I came here to learn. In those arms, I also had this overwhelming sense of perfection. I began to look at my life, and I would say, oh, that was a mistake. And what I was being told, not with words, but just with pure energy, is there are no mistakes. And then I would see my life and think, ooh, no, that was wrong, and I knew it was wrong, and I did it anyway. All I felt was pure, unconditional love. In fact, I was told, those are your judgments, not mine. In fact, there was no judgment. There was only pure love. And I experienced it. And I felt divine. I felt like I was part of that. And being, brought up in a biblical home, the words, I am that I am, kept coming to me as I was being held by this divine creator. And then I learned again about choice. It was communicated not through words, that I could feel like I was a victim my whole life. I could beat myself up for driving the car and have guilt. Or in this perfect, sacred moment, I could give my son back and therefore exercise my will in the whole situation. And in all that perfect love, I was able to kiss my little boy and give him back. And then I woke up in the hospital bed. Back to the pain, the amputation, the arm that wasn't working, all of it. But I had a different perspective. Okay, there's always choice. Now, it was not easy. I mean, I was going to have to go home, and that was interesting. Spencer had come and seen me in the hospital, but, what was it going to be like going to the grocery store and to school? And I was in a wheelchair. I had one leg. This leg was still all braced up. It's got 6 pins and a plate in it. I couldn't use my right arm. My brothers came and had to literally lift me into the wheelchair. We went home and they'd put a ramp up for me. I was watching as Spencer was looking out the window, and my brothers, his uncles, were literally lifting me into the wheelchair. And I bet that was hard for him, to see his dad like that. And I began to go up to the front door, and he came running out toward me, but he ran right past me. He went right by me. And I thought, I knew this was hard. This is going to be rough. And as I navigated to turn to go up the ramp, I just peeked over and realized what he had done is he had run across the street. He was knocking on all the neighbors' doors. And he was saying, come out. Come out. My dad made it home. Come see my dad. Well, he did that, and then he ran and threw himself on my lap, and that about killed me because I still had all the sutures down the middle from the abdominal stuff. And he threw his arms around my neck. And I held him in that wheelchair, and I said, are you going to be okay with this? I mean, I'm going to be like this for a while. And I used terms that he would understand. I said, they're going to make me a really cool Darth Vader leg, and I'll learn to walk, and we're going to make it, but are you going to be okay? And he said, Dad, if you were nothing but a puddle of blood, I would still love you. And then he laid into me, and I held him, and we wept. And I share this because that was the profound moment that I realized that was no less divine, holding my living son here, than it was holding my deceased son there. In fact, heaven had literally come right here. That was divine. And I learned something in that moment as well, that there's no reason that we can't create heaven right here. See, the following years were difficult. They were hard. Not only learning to walk and getting back to work and raising a son on my own, but I was like, where's all that love? Where's all that connection? Where's all that feeling? Now, every now and then it would happen. I would see somebody, and all of a sudden that veil would go away, and it would be like, oh my goodness, they're glorious. And I don't even know their name. But for the most part, I was homesick. I was permanently homesick. And I was wondering, how am I going to do this? How am I going to get through this? What am I ever going to do? And then little things would happen. At one time I sent Spencer up to bed by himself. I couldn't carry him up the stairs and tickle him like I used to. And he was growing bigger. But I collapsed one night, he went up there and I heard the door shut and I knew he was sleeping, and I just threw myself on the ground and sobbed, thinking, he's never going to remember his mom. He's going to forget. He's never going to know what a beautiful soul she was. What am I going to do? And there I was again, screaming out to God. And I don't profess to talk to God all the time, but on this occasion I did hear audibly 2 words as I was throwing my little fit. I heard, choose joy. Choose it. It's a choice. Remember, it's a choice. Choose it. And then things began to unfold in a beautiful way. Miracles happened. Tanya, my current wife, came into my life. I didn't date. I was still heartbroken. I was never going to get over it. I had convinced myself I could never love again, even though I had experienced unconditional love. And she showed up and began to put the pieces together. We adopted 2 boys, brothers. That was big for me. I knew how close brothers could be. My brothers almost lost their jobs to sit in the hospital with me. I learned a lot about men in that instance. we're so competitive by nature and we're going to win and we want to be right. And what I experienced was unconditional love. They would just sit and hold my hand and we'd just cry. Men were meant to be tender. We were meant to love and mentor and take care of each other. And when I say each other, all of us, both genders, there's really no difference. We just get to love each other. But to look at the extraordinary things, I really began to look at the world in a much, much different way. And in all that homesickness, I thought, rather than be homesick, why don't we bring it here? Why don't we create heaven here? Why don't we do something that brings that peace, that brings that love? And as this was all going on, I recalled the message there, and it was that. You are divine. You are the creator. Go and do the things you know you can do. And from my Christian background, greater things and more will you do if you just believe. And so these little glimpses in life, we're in troubled times, it seems. There's a lot of harsh judgments. There's a lot of things that go on in this very city that are heartbreaking. Heartbreaking that divine beings would do anything to harm someone else. And yet we are that. We are divine beings. And it's simply a choice. It's simply a choice. The governments aren't going to change it. The churches aren't going to change it. It's up to us. It's up to the individual to go out and be love. To literally be love. I used to get tripped up on biblical verse. It said, "Be ye therefore perfect." And I thought, oh dear. Little Sermon on the Mount. Yeah, that's no small task. But it was to be. It never said to become. To be that. To be that. Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither spin nor do they toil, and yet Solomon in all of his glory is not arrayed like one of them. You're perfect. You're beautiful. You're divine just the way you are. Go and simply be that. Be that. Last Christmas, I work with a fellow who has a camera, and I was having trouble with my prosthetic limb. It was broken. It was in the shop for repairs. When I break a leg, they just take it to the shop, and I wait for 5 or 6 days, and they get the hydraulics back going, and everything's okay. But I happened to be on crutches at the time. And this was actually spur of the moment. My buddy came down, and we were talking, and I said, what would be cool? What if we went and did a little social experiment? And he said, I'll get the camera. Let's go do this. So we went down at Christmas time, and this was, near my home. And I posed as a one-legged homeless person. Not out of any mockery at all, but in total respect. I'm actually on the board at home for a very large homeless shelter. And they are wildly successful. Over 80% of the people that come into that shelter within 40 days are on their feet, sober, working, and in independent housing. It's beautiful. Everybody falls on hard times. Everybody does. But we did this little experiment. We videoed it. It's about 5 minutes. Would you like to see it? Okay. During the hustle and bustle of the holiday season, I've been noticing all the homeless people on the streets, people in interesting situations. What would it be like to be them? And anyone who knows me is aware that I actually lost my left leg in an automobile accident several years ago. Actually lost half my family in that accident. They were killed instantly, and it was devastating. I spent 6 months in the hospital, but I had so many people around me, to buoy me up and to offer assistance. But what if I didn't? If it could just as easily be me on the street as them, if circumstances were just a little bit different. And I decided maybe I should go walk in their shoes. Maybe I should just go down and see what it's like to be homeless. You know, see what it's like to be on the street. See if anyone will acknowledge me. See if anybody will offer me any assistance or even look at me and acknowledge that I'm a human being or a person. So I made this sign, and I didn't want to ask for money or anything like that. It was simply soliciting a hug. You know, poor in spirit, will you share a hug? Just wondering if someone would acknowledge or would actually give of themselves and give a part of them to a stranger, to someone who may appear homeless. And if they could overlook, you know, what happened to land someone there, and simply concentrate on what could be done to elevate them and lift them out of a bad situation into a better one.
Well, I saw the sign.
You saw the sign, you thought, hey, how did I can give up?
Well, I mean, if you had money or something, I would have, give you $1 or $2 or something,
I wasn't looking for money.
Oh, yeah.
Just a hug, man. But listen, thank you for stopping.
Yeah,
because,
sure.
For you to just acknowledge that, hey, I'm here, I'm a person, I can give a hug, that's easy to do.
Yeah, I can give those
It
cheers.
changes everything. It changes everything.
It does.
So listen, I actually have something for you.
Oh, my gosh.
I want you to do a favor for me.
Yeah, what's up?
Because you got that kind of heart.
Yeah, sure. Oh my gosh, dude. What?
No. Here's what you get to do.
For what?
Take that and go make a difference. Go find somebody who really deserves it. I mean, you can buy them a hot drink. You can do something that will really change your world tonight.
Dude.
Because you're there, man. I mean, you came and gave me a hug. Just go find somebody who really can make a difference for it.
Sure.
And create a little miracle.
Thanks, man.
Create a little miracle.
Thanks, man. That was good.
Appreciate you coming over, because so many people are out here and nobody looks or notices or does anything for you. But I just wonder, what made you come over and offer me money or come to talk to me? There's always somebody in need, isn't there? Listen, we really appreciate what you guys did. Let me do something for you, okay? Here's what I want you to do.
No, it's okay.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I want you to take that and give it to someone else who really needs it, okay? Who really deserves it, all right? Because you can create a miracle with this. Just somebody who really deserves it. And you get something nice. Might even be for your mom or your sister, okay? But anyway, thank you for coming over and just looking and noticing and seeing that people do, we get to connect with each other, because you can create miracles by just smiling, just being there and just saying things, okay? You guys are awesome. Happy holidays, all right? Get into a place that's warm.
I'm going in shelter tonight.
Yeah.
I'm down there tonight, yeah.
Good
It's
for
too
you.
cold.
Oh no, you can't be outside. But here's the thing: get yourself something. And if you're taken care of, I'll tell you what, give it to somebody else who really deserves it. Happy New Year. We'll talk to you soon. All right.
All right, guys, get warm, huh?
We will. Thank you. Take care. Got it. The most interesting thing about doing that, and you know, when somebody acknowledged you, there was so many people that just walked by. In fact, they avoided. They wouldn't even look. You know, and then finally, it was a young woman. You know, was the first one to come running over and give me a hug, and we stood there for some time. You know, and it became contagious. Then everybody was coming over. The interesting thing is they all wanted to give me money. I'm like, no, and that was a little, you know, trick. We thought we'll just let them go give it to somebody who really deserves to have it. But was to be acknowledged. You know, to have them look and see me as a person and say, I see you. I know you matter. I don't know you, but you matter. And that's how we change things. You know, Scott said, my intention is to raise the consciousness of the planet, and it truly is. I have this crazy belief that we will create heaven here, that there might not be anywhere to go, that nobody's coming to save us, and it's actually up to us, that we get to do it. We get to ripple out from here in absolute, pure, unconditional love and change things and shift consciousness. You know, Mother Teresa said a beautiful thing. She said, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. You know, go home and take care of those people under your roof, or those friends or loved ones and spouses, lovers, workmates, brothers, sisters, whoever it is. Because truly we are brothers and sisters. I don't care what color your skin is, or what your religious beliefs are, or what sexual orientation you have. You are my brother. You are my sister, and I love you. And if we start there, that's what shifts things. Love will conquer all of it. Love will overcome all of it. We are pure love. You're going to hear that time and time and time again. That's the extraordinary part of it. And you don't have to die or have a near-death experience to realize it. I'm a slow learner. I think they smacked me around a little bit so I would get it. If you want to experience the extraordinary, go out and hug a stranger today. I mean, go up to somebody and literally just throw your arms around them and say, you matter, and you're beautiful, and you're divine, and leave it at that. And see what you experience. That's the divine. This is my family. This is, my oldest son got married last summer. I don't have a current picture. I wish I had wedding pictures on my computer, but I now have a beautiful daughter who is amazing. What a blessing. You know, the divine feminine energy? There's this story of a potter. And he would make these beautiful pots, and then he would fire them in a kiln, and then wrap them in burlap and smash them, and then unwrap the burlap and meticulously piece all the pieces back together and fill the cracks with gold and silver and precious metals. And when someone said, why do you do that? Why would you take a perfectly good pot and break it? He said, that's what gives it character. That's what makes it a one-of-a-kind masterpiece. My experience has been that the feminine energy is really the great potter. You're the ones that know how to pick up the pieces and fuse them together and make things far more beautiful than they ever were. And I think in being broken is what creates the masterpiece. You know, that's what gives us experience. The one thing I learned in that other realm, for the short peek I got into it, is that we're simply here to learn. And we'll learn in the perfect way for us. The perfect way. And we'll all be on different paths. We'll learn through different experiences, but our emotions will be universal. I want to leave time for questions, but if you'd close your eyes again one more time, and you can peek at my little picture of this lone soul sitting on the pier. But take a deep breath in and simply ask, what can one person do? What difference can one person make? There's a poem that goes something like, if not here, where? If not now, when? If not me, who? You may already have images coming up of what you might do in your life, in your communities, in your families, in your churches, in your workplaces, to make a difference, to take a stand for love, to take a stand for that part of us that is already divine. There is nothing to become. We are that. And by being that is where we shift consciousness. And one person can make a huge, huge difference. So go ahead and open up your eyes. I want to read something to you, if you'll bear with me. I heard this recently and I wanted to share it. Everybody just touch your forehead. Just touch your forehead. Some of you will say that's your third eye where you can see clearly. May our thoughts be kind and wise, and may we approach all with compassion. May we let go of harsh judgments. Now touch your ears. May we become aware of the suffering around us, and may we hear their cries of distress. You already know where to go. You already know what to do. Now just touch your mouth. May we have the courage and wisdom to speak up for those who are wronged, to be a voice for those who suffer from injustice of any form. And now show me your hands. Rub them together a little bit. May we be ready to give when someone needs our gifts. And may we be open to receive from others when we are in need ourselves. I learned a lot about receiving. There were so many people around me that loved me through my experience. I learned what true love is. And it wasn't all in that realm. There was plenty of it right here. Now touch your heart. May we be willing to meet our own suffering and to do so with deep compassion for ourselves. Anita spoke of self-love. She couldn't have teed this up any better. I had that biblical verse that said, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, I cannot give what I don't have. I must love myself before I can ever give that to anyone else. And finally, just stomp your feet a little bit. Give us strength to walk with one another as brothers and sisters, knowing we are each one a necessary part in this beautiful world. And truly, you are. The universe. It's an amazing word, the universe. One verse. It's one verse. You have a vibration and a tone that only you can sing. Only you can carry that note in this universe. You're unique, you're perfect, you're here for an absolute divine reason. You know, I happen to be standing up here today, but we're no different. There's nobody special. And yet everybody is so special. Be yourself. Be the perfect self you are. Tap into the divine and let that shine out. And you literally will change the world. You literally will change the world, and we will. So thank you. Thank you, and we'll have questions and answers, but thank you so much. And please ask questions. Don't leave me standing up here looking at you, because then I start to sweat and get uncomfortable.
First of all, thank you. That's one of the most moving. I mean, I had tears in my eyes half the time. Thank you. That was wonderful.
Me too. It's okay. Thank you.
So what have you learned, Jeffrey, is one of the best ways to keep from going back into the would've, could've, should've's?
That's a beautiful question. How many do that? Would've, could've, should've. You know, my oldest son, who has been a strength to me through this whole process. In fact, he teases me. He says, should. He says, don't should all over yourself, Dad. Stop shoulding all over yourself. He went through a tough adolescence, and this is what gave him wisdom. You know, he got to be a teenager, and things got dark for him, and he came to me about age 18, 19. He was 6'2" or 3 at the time, and all grown up. And he's like, Dad, I don't get it. You know, he said, I was a little 7-year-old boy, and I prayed every night to feel something. I just wanted to see Mom once. I just wanted to feel anything, and there was nothing there. He said, I beat my knuckles bloody on the door, and it was never answered. I don't get it. Either you're crazy, either you're deceived, or you're lying, because God didn't care about me. And he went on a pretty dark path. Now, I was, you know, panicked as a father. Oh no, what do I do? What do I do? And I recall going home. We were on a family camping trip when that happened, and I went into my mother has a cabin. I went into the room, and I was praying. I pray, you know, I do, but I said, what do I do? Please give him anything. I'll give all mine away for him to feel something. And I didn't hear the audible voice, but I call it the voice that speaks to your heart. And what I was told was, stop judging your son. Stop thinking that his experience must look like yours. Don't you know he's in my hands? He's having the perfect experience for his soul's growth. Your job, Dad, is to love him unconditionally. Let go of all the expectations of what you think he should be, or could be, or would be. And he had friends going to jail. He was in a rock band, and I was all panicked in fear. But when I shifted that fear to love and trust, that's when it shifted. Now, I still have my bad days. Oh, I would have. I'll go to my room and say, oh, I should have said that, you know. Stop it. It's a beat-up stick. We go around and beat ourselves up. Everything is in divine order. We make choices, and the universe honors our choices because we get to experience the results of our choices. And there is no judgment. There's only love. When my little Griffin was wandering around and picking up Easter eggs and slobbering on himself and calling them balls, do you think I had any judgment for that? It was perfect. He was learning to walk. And the entire universe looks and says, they're learning to walk. My children are getting it. They're learning to walk. When I have bad days, I will go lay on the ground, look at the sky, and I'll feel the earth beneath me. I swear I can feel Mother Earth just taking out all that judgment, all that stress, all that stuff that I'm shooting all over myself with. And I also remember myself as a little boy. I had you remember your earliest, happiest memory. That's what I do. My earliest memory, earliest, happiest memory was of my dad putting on his socks. And I was on his lap, and my mom was making breakfast. They were soon to be divorced, but that morning they were happy. Another profound memory I have is when I was about 3.5 or 4, and I was behind the couch sobbing because they were splitting up. It was done. And when I'm having those bad days, what I do is in my mind I go back to that place and I literally go to that little boy. And I pick him up just like I did my son in the other realm and just like I had my 7-year-old, and I hold myself. And I see myself as perfect, those perfect little hands and little eyes, and I realize my life is in divine order. And it's okay. And I comfort that child and say, it's okay. We're actually going to make it. It's just a moment, and every moment shifts. And we get to choose how to experience it. I trust that's helpful. Does that work? Beautiful. Thank you for that question. Very good question.
Thank you, Scott, so much for helping me recall my experiences. First, my near-death experience taught me how I'm loved. The second near-death experience took me to the wife I had lost when she drowned, and I felt guilty. This has led me to seek how do we manifest the gift that the near-death experience teaches. And what I've come to is that the power of meditation. I even had to go study under a guru, and after 7 years at his feet, I told him my near-death experience. And he scratched his head and he says, "Oh, I do that every day. Didn't your Lord Master teach you to die daily?" I'd love to hear your words about the role of meditation in what we seek to do here.
Beautiful. Thank you for the question. It's a beautiful question. You know, I learned in the hospital what it was like to be still. I couldn't move. I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't get up and go for a walk. I couldn't even speak. It's just glasses. I get them at all $1. It's no big deal. But being still is where the answers are. It's in that stillness that the light comes. I consciously meditate daily. Now, I used to pray. I know I would say these eloquent prayers, but it was all about what I was saying and what I was going to say next. Now I shut my mouth and I listen. And I listen. And I'm still. And I literally, energetically go within myself, into my heart, and see what is there for me. What are the answers? Where do I go? What do I say? And to whom? What do I do for my self-care? And in the question is the power, really. But meditation is a very powerful tool for me. I'm busy, I work, I've got a day job, and then I jump on airplanes and come do this on weekends. And even 10 minutes of being still can change everything. And silencing that clutter in our mind. I mean, really that's what it is. It's pushing the energy from here right into there. And we all have that ability. I can't stress this enough. You don't have to go through a near-death experience to connect with the divine. That's the extraordinary part of it. It's there for everyone. It's there for everyone. So thank you for the question.
An important area of interest for many of us is communicating with departed loved ones, and you did it during your experience and then shortly afterwards in the hospital. Since you've healed and over the years since then, have you gone back and communicated with them again? And if so, how did you initiate that?
That's a beautiful question, and yes, I have. Thank you for asking that. Wow, yes, I. It happens in many different ways. In fact, I cover that in my second book because I've had continued communication. And this will be a little bit of a long answer because I want to cover all the different ways that it has come. At one point, when Tanya had come into my life, my current wife now, and I realized that I was falling in love with her, that was tough. I mentioned my wife had said, I want to be buried near our home, and I would go to the gravesite often. So would Spencer. I recall Spencer as a little boy, probably, I don't know, maybe 8, 9. It was just a few years after the accident. And he was sobbing, pulling on the grass, saying, Mom, just come back. How do you comfort that? As I was having feelings for Tanya, then I was the one on the grass sobbing, saying, I don't know what to do. I'm having feelings for another woman and you're gone. And how could you do this? How could you leave me? How could you go away? How could you, I mean, I don't even walk right. How can I raise a son and I'm falling in love with somebody else? And I swear she came to me in that instance. I didn't see her. I don't see dead people, but I feel them. And actually she came joyfully laughing. She said, you're so silly. Of course you're having feelings for someone else. I sent her, stupid. You know? Why? I would have these deja vus when I would be with Tanya, profound deja vus of my first marriage and my first falling in love. And Tamara, we don't even call her my deceased wife. We call her my angelic wife. My current wife now has communication with her in many ways that they never even knew each other in this life. But she said, that's why you're having the deja vus. And she actually let me know, I can't move on till you do. Don't you know we're still connected? Don't you know I see your pain, I feel it, I watch it? Choose joy was again the message. Choose it for yourself. I'm tired of watching you in agony. And I love you that much. And I loved you enough to leave. That was the crazy thing. I'm saying, how could you leave me? And she said, I loved you enough to leave. Because otherwise your life would be different. You know, we'd be sitting on the back porch getting fat together. You wouldn't be in Orlando. You wouldn't be doing anything else. I loved you enough to give you the experience that you wanted to have, and part of that was me leaving. So don't curse my love. So those were spontaneous. I mean, that happened. I have dreams often with deceased loved ones. Recently, I had a dream about my deceased son. It was a crazy dream. In the dream, I was in the front seat of my father's pickup truck on the farm. And it was an old white International pickup. I don't even know if they make them anymore. And I looked down and I was in a red corduroy jumpsuit with the snaps that go up the inner thigh. And I had white toddler shoes on. And I thought, whoa, wait a minute. I remember this. I remember that stupid jumpsuit. I never liked it. I remember the shoes. I remember the truck. I remember the smell of the truck. And it was in the field. It was out in the field, and all the cows were moving up against the truck, and the truck was moving because there was feed in the back of the truck, and the cows were all trying to get at the feed. And I thought, I remember this. I remember being in this jumpsuit, sitting in this pickup. I remember all of this. And then the cows scattered, and my father showed up. And he opened the door, and he comforted me and sat in the truck with me. And I thought, I remember this. I remember this perfectly. I couldn't have been any more than 14 months old. It was the age of my Griffin when he left this room. And at that thought, the truck, the jumpsuit, my dad, everything went away, and there I stood in the field alone as my grown man self. And I thought, Griffin, And I looked, and there he was, but he was a grown man. Beautiful man, tall, strong, but I knew in a moment, that's him, that's Griffin. And I wanted to race to him in the dream. I wanted to race to him. And something held me back. The energy just held me back, and he stepped closer and just looked me in the eye. And there was no verbal communication. It was just telepathic communication. He looked at me, and what he shared with me is, I wanted you to remember that. Because I will never forget that I was your little boy. And I'll never forget that you are my dad. Of course, at that, I pushed through the energy, and I raced to him, and I embraced him again. Big, strong, taller than me. And in the dream, he leaned into my ear, and then he did speak verbally to me. And he said, Dad, I have a message for you. And I thought, wow, you know, a message from my son, who's this beautiful grown man. You know, what's he going to tell me? You know, buy Apple stock? I didn't know what he would, you know, I didn't know what he would say, but he leaned into my ear. And he said, Dad, and those words meant a lot to me from this grown man. He'd be almost 19 now, by the way. He said, Dad, I love you, and I'm proud of you. And I squoze into him, and then I woke up again. But those dreams are so real. So that was a dream. I had communication through a dream. Oftentimes, I will presence them. You asked, how do you initiate it? Well, I don't know. I mean, for me, sometimes I go to a quiet place, I be still, and I remember, odd that we did this morning, I remember a time when I was so happy, when time literally did stand still for me. I talked about it in my first book. I was sitting on the porch. Tamara, my first wife, was making banana bread, and Spencer was about 3, and he was sitting on my lap, and we were eating licorice whips and watching the sprinklers water the lawn. You know, simple little things. But time stood still. I knew in that moment, that sacred moment, that that was as good as it gets. That was pure joy. So I'll go there in my mind, and I'll presence them. And I'll be open to what they want to tell me. I've done all kinds of things. In my homesickness, through those years of just wanting to be back home, I went into Merkaba meditations and all kinds of shamanic exercises and Reiki and everything else, searching for how do I connect. Now I've realized it's all energy. Be still, be open to it, and don't have any expectations for it. But just send out love, listen, see what happens. I was incredibly lonely one time in nature. I do love nature. And I was in aspen trees, and the leaves all started rustling. And I just had the thought of Tamara, my first wife, and that voice to my heart, she said, every time you hear those leaves rustle, it's me just telling you I'm here and that I still love you. You one-legged son of a gun, you know, I still love you. So meditation, being open, sending out love, and sometimes completely unexpectedness, but they're there. What I know is they're there, they're near us, they're watching us. We may not always be aware of it, but that doesn't change the fact that the realms are very meshed. Thank you for the question.
A powerful story about healing. And in all of what you've experienced, do you feel that what needs to be done with yourself and all of us is heal within ourselves to bring us closer to what the divine is?
Beautiful. Thank you for the question and the comment. You know, it was interesting, and I talk biblically because that's my upbringing. I'm far less interested in religion now than I am spirituality. But there's been very spiritual people that have walked this earth. Many of them. And they did teach love. But on one particular occasion, this fellow Jesus, you know, he was healing people. And a doctor came up and said, I want to be healed. And he said, physician, heal thyself. And that is key. The power is within us to heal ourselves, to heal our own heart, to be at one or in line with who we are. And then it does ripple out from there in such a way that people feel it. They get it. They feel that love, and they begin to love themselves too. It's like contagious. It's like those weird little virus things, you see on video games where it spreads. And when one rises, we all rise as well. But yeah, healing yourself is the key, because it starts there. It starts there. And is that a fair answer? Thank you, sir. Thank you for the question.
Hi, Jeff. It's more of a thank you on 2 points that you brought up. One of which was the idea that we're bringing heaven here. And it's something that's personal to me, which I feel that sort of, because we are part of the divine spark, we are home. Here's home. And it's sort of bringing it out. So I want to thank you for that. And the other thing you mentioned as well is it's in regards to when you talk about you when you're in hospital with your brothers holding your hand and whatever else. And it's okay to be a tender, loving man. And I know that that's something that I've recently come to realise within myself. It's okay to be a feeling person. I was run over at 13. I had no memory of my accident until I was 34, when I recovered it through hypnotherapy. I had my near-death experience through the hypnotherapy. And since then, it's been a journey of learning to love myself, learning to love others because I can love myself, which is what you've been brought up, and the balance between the divine masculine and the divine feminine with the pot story you told before, which is beautiful. It's what I experienced with my now partner Krista, and I just wanted to thank you for bringing those things up, especially in regards to being a tender man and being loving and being able to love. I think that's so important, and it's just wonderful. So I just want to thank you for that.
You're so kind. Thank you. Where are you from?
I'm from the Britain, UK. Just sort of somewhere near Manchester, if people know what Manchester.
Right.
Sort of.
Yep.
Yeah.
Manchester United, right? No.
Yeah. So my intention is to move over here with Krista at some point soon. And that's part of the change, part of sort of learning to love myself, part of being honest with myself and wanting to be where I want to be, and home is partly with her. Like you say about your your current partner, learning to love her and learning to realise that she was divine for you, as I believe that Krista was divine for me. So thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. It's fantastic.
Hi. Going off an earlier point that was brought, as far as healing ourselves or physicians healing themselves, how do you suggest we do that, especially for someone who hasn't had a near-death experience, or how do we do that without going through experiences like that?
It may be different for every individual. I mean, now even if I have an ache and a pain somewhere, and this might seem odd, but I breathe light into that area. I breathe light into that area, and I visualize perfection. Mm-hmm. One of the beautiful things is if we hold people in their magnificence instead of in their brokenness, they literally heal. Anita again mentioned this morning that she knew she was well, her body was just catching up. And oftentimes I'll breathe that light and I'll energetically tell my soul to heal my body, because I know it can. The soul is perfect, divine, forever. The body is made of cells, but each of those cells has intelligence and light within it. Otherwise, how would the hands know to be hands and the eyes know to be eyes? But by visualizing and holding ourselves or others in their magnificence rather than in their brokenness, it's not about being sick, it's about being well, and addressing it and being very honest about what am I learning. I asked a lot of why questions through my process. Why me? Why the family? Why the leg? But when I began to ask, what am I learning from this? Then I began to heal, because I found joy and wisdom in that. I had a dream about my deceased wife once where she told me all there is wisdom there. And it's when I was beating myself up and shooting on myself, and she said, it's just about what you're learning. So everything is wisdom. It becomes light. It becomes illuminated, even if it's hard or here. So whatever you're dealing with is for a specific reason, and there's a lesson within that. So ask what, and breathe in light and see what happens.
Thank
you. One more.
Well, first, like everybody, I'd like to thank you for sharing your amazing story, and it was absolutely beautifully, now looking in hindsight, you can see how everything fit into place. And this actually reminds me very much of a spiritual retreat where there's so much incredible energy, and I feel so positive, and I feel I can conquer anything. But much like a retreat, there's something called the fourth day, when you have to leave this 3 days of amazing togetherness where everybody feels the same kind of positivity, and then you have to tackle the day-to-day. And like you and Anita, you have your experience. But those of us that didn't have that suffering that you went through and that whole metamorphosis that you went through that you can go back to, what recommendations do you have for those of us that haven't gone through an NDE or anything like that, but yet with time, like anything else, fades a little bit and you kind of get stuck into your routine, and how do you bring that back, and how do you keep that?
Thank you for the question, and quickly, because we're out of time, but go create it. Go create that. Don't leave here and waste your time and money. I mean, don't go away from here and say, well, that was a great 3 or 4 days. Now I'm going back to my life. Take the love you've felt. Take the insights you've had. I mentioned it. Go hug a stranger. Don't just do it today. Do it every day. Go find and be open to, where do I go? What do I do to connect me to the divine? And almost always it's in serving others or even serving yourself. So self-love, loving other people, and going and creating that situation where you don't need the near-death experience or the tragedy or the suffering. You literally get to step into the joy and the healing and be the light in the world that literally illuminates out and shifts everything. So go create it. It's up to you. You're the creator. You have the power to do it. Thank you. I love you all. Thank you very much.